All right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I think we're on like episode 194 or something like that of Blowback Exposing Imperial Decline. I am Billy Bob on the West Coast. I've got my regular co host, Ian Comer, streaming live. I believe he's still in Crimea in his dacha. And we got we had a little hiatus last week. We're back with today's episode entitled Will the USA Invade Iran? It is a very prescient title because, there's this buildup, right? We got a couple, maybe 2 or 3 Marine expeditionary units on their way. We've got a third carrier group coming over. There's talk of C-17s landing in Jordan repeatedly, dropping off troops. So, what's going on is the question. Are we doing a land invasion of Iran? I mean, that's a big question. The New York Times today, there's a couple news items. New York Times today is making the case that it's the Clown Prince in Saudi Arabia who is insisting, and he's really pushing Trump. He's convincing Trump that a ground invasion is necessary to get rid of the hardline Iranian regime. Another news item. So the other news item was about Trump using these threats to manipulate the stock market, but that's a little bit of a different topic. So Ian, what do you think is going on? Do you see a buildup in preparation for an actual ground invasion? If so, what do you think they're going to take? The coastline, islands, or are they going to work with the Baluchs in that area of Iran? What is it? Southern Iran. Anyway, I know you have thoughts.
Well, I do think the stock market is relevant because for those of you who didn't see the news, Trump claimed right before the markets opened, Trump claimed that his. Okay, so let me step back even further. Before that, he made this 48-hour ultimatum, where they're going to start destroying the Iranian energy infrastructure and water, and and it was which was interesting because that would, of course, very clearly be a war crime. Because there is such a thing as dual purpose objects that also are military objects, but when you just it's like right before committing a crime, telling everybody that you're committing a crime and why you're committing the crime. If you just, it's not even say we're going to destroy this infrastructure to break the Iranian military. No, he says just to make them suffer. And then immediately after that, he stepped back and said, well, actually, we're not going to do that because we're doing a 5-day extension because there's peace talks. And he did that right before the markets opened. So cynical people said he's just, again, manipulating, which he's done several times so far, where he just puts out fake news to manipulate the markets. And the amazing thing is that it works. Makes people question, is like, are the markets even real? Like, who are these people who listen to this orange pedophile ranting nonsense? Is just obviously not true. It's just kind of amazing that this has worked for him so far. But anyways, immediately after he said that, like 40 minutes after he said that, Iran put out their own statement saying that it's not true. They're not in talks with Trump. He just made that up. And so that's really got people asking, well, okay, what was the point of doing that? Now, one theory I have seen floated, I wouldn't call it a far-fetched theory, but it's one of those, it's when you make predictions, people tend to not look at it mathematically. When you make a prediction, the more variables you add to that prediction, the less likely it is to come true. So if I just say, Russia and Ukraine are one day going to go to war with each other, but don't give an exact time for that to happen, and then when it eventually happens, you say, oh, well, I was right. But when you give a specific time frame, especially a narrow time frame, that obviously makes it less likely to come true. But still, I think there's some merit to this hypothesis that Trump did that because that 5-day window gets him to the weekend. And then if he did a ground invasion, it would happen during the weekend. And that would give him some time to hope there were some early successes. And then, by the time Monday rolled back around, he could say, oh, the war is over yet, or, whatever nonsense he wants to say next to keep the market from reacting to the ground invasion. So it's not impossible. That could possibly be what he was thinking. Now, Billy Bob and I have had this ongoing disagreement about Iran. Actually, Billy Bob was actually correct. He said, I think what was a week or maybe a few days before it happened, our last show before the attack, the end of February, you said you were absolutely certain it was inevitable, is your words. And you turned out to be right. I was less. I said there was like a 50, 60% or 70% chance it could happen. I was kind of more on the fence. Hedging my bets a bit more than Billy Bob did, and he turned out to be correct. Now that said, I've for years when Iran has come up, I've said here's the problem: an air campaign would not work, and there's by now enough historical examples to prove that an air campaign alone would not work against Iran. Even against much smaller, tiny countries like Serbia. And their campaign took months, and they kept planes up there. Then we had Ukraine, where of course they're getting external support in the country, and they're having their own planes. So it's just this idea that, and Iran's several times larger in terms of population. I'm not sure size-wise what the exact lineup is. I think they're both big countries, but anyways, 90 million people versus around 30, 35 million. So it's not a country you can just beat by bombing a few things. It's just real life doesn't work that way. So they would have to do. I've been saying this they would have to do a ground invasion, and I also have been saying for years that if Iran have to did I lose? Okay, I'm sorry, I lost the connection for a minute. But if they did a ground invasion, they would have to do a draft. And my reason for that is if you look at the numbers and the two examples, the most pertinent examples I brought up were the Gulf War 1991 and the invasion of Iraq in 2003. And if you look at both of those, there was a large commitment of reservists. Around a third of the total American force was National Guard and Army reservists, Marine Corps reservists, Navy reservists, and so on. And now, today, aside from the recruiting shortfalls, they are they lean much heavier into the reserves than they did. If you can research it, like you can look up the Army total force policy, but there's just been policy of standardizing the force and leaning heavier into the reserves. And so I think if you're already leaning into the reserves, then who's left to send the second wave, to send replacements, because you are going to have casualties. It's just delusional to think there wouldn't be casualties based on what we've seen over the last 4 or 5 years. So and there's where are those replacements going to come from? They would have to do a draft. I think they would have to do it at the beginning of the war, right? Because it takes several months at least, more like probably closer to 6 months to get somebody through training. And unlike countries like Russia that has mandatory, compulsory military service for men, we don't have a large pool of military trained people, while Russia and countries like Russia that has that does. And what I mean by that is you have a guy, even if he's just a civilian, no connection to the military, he just did his 1 year or 2 years of military service. He already has all those basic fundamentals done. So you can just train that guy for a few weeks, send him to the front, and he's good because you already taught all that stuff to him. but we don't have that. Even the individual, what do we call the individual ready reserve, which reached its peak during the surge, probably 2011, 2012, 2013 was when it was at its biggest. Now it's shrunk. Those guys, it's been 20 years. So I just think we would have to, if we did a ground invasion. So I'm feeling very pessimistic about the whole thing because I don't see the USA backing out. I mean, the USA could theoretically maybe back out, but even if Iran said, okay, we will leave US targets alone, there is no reason for them to stop pounding the hell out of Israel. And I don't think that's politically possible for the USA to just stand aside and let Israel get pummeled to dust. So I see this just escalating until there's a ground invasion. I don't know if I'd be bold enough to set a date like within the next 5 days, but I think it's close to inevitable that we're going to get there.
So yesterday morning, I think when the news right before the stock market opened, because everybody expected the stock market to just crash immediately because of Trump's ultimatum, the 48-hour ultimatum. Everybody expected, the price of energy, oil especially, to go through the roof because if Trump made good on his promise to destroy Iran's largest power plant, Iran would, of course, reciprocate. And they would destroy the power plants in the Gulf states and the desalination plants in the Gulf states and in Israel. And so, and it would have been a huge escalation and it would have been a war crime, the U.S. initiating that, like you said, Ian. So it just was very, interesting timing, right? Like an hour before the stock market opens, Trump just puts out this big, huge lie that, he's in diplomacy and it's going to take 5 days. But here's the thing. So the context of the next 5 days is kind of what all the military strategists have been saying in the alternative media. So the Larry Johnsons, the Danny Davises, Lawrence Wilkersons, all the military CIA guys have always said, they've made the case that the United States is going to attack Iran, but we're going to quickly run out of ammunition, right? We're going to quickly run out of ammunition. The two carrier groups that we have there are going to expend all their munitions in the first week or two. And then what are they going to do? Then Iran will, take the initiative. And so basically, this week that's coming right now is what is going to be the, it's like the reloading phase, right? And so there's 2 or 3 military expeditionary units. Each has their own aircraft carrier, their own fighter wings that they can launch missiles from jets, and so they're all fully loaded with munitions. There's 2 of those coming, and there's 1 more carrier group coming. So essentially, this is the week that the U.S. is reloading. They don't have they've already spent their munitions that was available to them, and now they're reloading. One of the carrier groups that was here is in Crete, ostensibly for a whole year for repairs. That's the which one is that? The Gerald Ford, I think. So the Gerald Ford went to Crete. It's currently under repairs. Suggestions are it's going to be 12 to 14 months. But in the meantime, you got 3 more, at least 3 more strike groups coming, again, all fully loaded. And so that's happening this week. And the question is, what are they going to do when they're in place, when they're in theater, when they're ready to do whatever the strategy is? What is the strategy? And, all we can do is speculate. And that was my question to you, really. What is your speculation, Ian, about, when they arrive? And so there's, again, it's the third carrier group is the George H.W. Bush. That's the third carrier group. It will only be the second, again, because the Abraham Lincoln is still there, but the Gerald Ford is no longer there. The Gerald Ford is getting repaired. But there's at least 2 or 3 Marine expeditionary units also coming, and they all have, their own set of aircraft, their own set of amphibious landing things, and their own set of destroyers that protect them and are able to launch, sea to land missiles, etc. So what's going on with this? Like, what is Trump's plan? Like, Is he just gonna start bombing shit again? They've already said they've run out of targets. You know, what the fuck is this all about?
Well, it's interesting, like you mentioned, running out of targets. I mean, even I saw memes about that. I saw tweets about this. His most recent speech he made, I think it was yesterday. He made that speech, and somebody had the timestamps for every time Trump contradicts himself. Like you said, he at one point said we've won, and then he said we're going to win, and then we need your help to win. And then so it's like, well, guy, which is it? I do think he has enough. I mean, so one thing needs to be said. They did have surprise with the initial sneak attacks. I think if they do a ground attack, obviously they're thinking about how to achieve surprise. So they'll have some surprise, and we can't really be sure. Even the Iranians can't be sure what they're going to attack and what but I do think they have enough for the initial attack. So because Ukraine is our main example of what a modern war looks like, with air power, with missiles, and with drones. Iraq was too long ago. The Iraq invasion was too long ago, and the Iraqi army collapsed too quickly for that really to be an example. And there's just Ukraine's our go-to example. So if you look at the initial attacks, the initial offensives in that war, like Kursk started with they didn't start with 100,000 guys. They started with 5 to 10,000 men and vehicles. That was a land invasion, not an amphibious operation, which would be a little different. But there is such a thing as saturation of the theater. So you can get a foothold with those 5 to 10,000 men. Iran can't obviously just send their entire military to that one spot. It doesn't work that way. If they don't fail, if that initial landing doesn't fail, then you can support it. And you could even look at it from the propaganda, from the political perspective also. I'm sorry, I cut out. Okay, I cut out. Okay, I'm back. Anyways, if you look at it from the political perspective, you have this heroic Marine landing, and then Trump can say to Congress, "Oh, these heroic Marines have done the impossible. They've reached this great foothold. We need to support them." Then you could potentially move more forces to support that. I don't know what kind of time frame, and that's the other problem here is the time frame, because 2003 and 1991, they had 5 months of prep time just to move all those guys to the Middle East, to Kuwait, to attack Iraqi forces. How are they going to do that in a reasonable time frame? I don't know.
So I'm trying to find a map because I have some specific suggestions of what the plan is, but each time I pull up a map, why
don't you look for a map, and I can follow up with these comments. We got several comments here. Okay, so Billy Bob is going to find a map for his theorizing. I'm going to catch up on comments. Daryl, okay, so actually no, before Daryl, Vagabond said he missed the first 12 minutes. That's okay. I think if you've been listening this far, we more or less repeated what was said in the beginning. Daryl came in, our longtime friend. Daryl came in to say 30% of military-age men in the U.S. are foreign-born. That is actually a good point. And actually, in Europe, they have this idea that, and actually I think it was Germany that specifically did this. They pushed this, military service for citizenship idea. They have this idea that, these millions of refugees, et cetera, will come in and be willing to die, for the fatherland. I don't think that's the case. I might be mistaken, but I think, at least if I was an economic immigrant, I wouldn't be excited to die for the U.S. I mean, maybe I would I would actually feel like I want to defend the U.S. Okay, I've built a new life here. I will fight to defend it. I wouldn't travel to the other side of the world to die for Israel. So I think it's crazy to assume, these new Europeans and new Americans want to die for Israel. I think that's absurd. And actually, even these, like Muslim immigrants, they complain about anti-Semitism, and they say, "Oh, I don't blame them. I mean, why should they support Israel? I mean, it's one thing to support the USA, but why support Israel?" Okay, so you got a map. Billy Bob has a map.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. So there's two different, thoughts about what the military plan is. So I mean, the first idea is that these reinforcements, that are on the way. Again, second or third carrier group, depending on how you describe it, which is the George H.W. Bush carrier group.
Can you zoom in a little bit? Can you zoom in a bit?
So
you don't need
so this is the problem right here. Can you guys see my mouse? So this is the problem, right? So right here is where Iran controls. This is called the Strait of Hormuz. A lot of 20% of the world's oil and energy resources travel through this strait. And the problem is it's controlled by Iran. They have bases, or they have all kinds of, missile systems, artillery systems, and underground naval bases with attack boats as well as submarines all throughout this coast. And so my guess is, if they're going to do a land invasion, the whole point is to wrest control of this strait from Iran. Well, Iran maintains control of the strait in this area here, this U-shaped area. And so now the other thing is Baluchistan. When you zoom out, this is the Iranian border, but Baluchistan is kind of this whole area here. Not that, but like Baluchistan is like in this area. And so you have an ethnic group called the I'm really bad at pronunciations, but Baluchs, for lack of a better pronunciation, comprise an ethnic group. And this is always how, Western imperialism, finds proxies. They will identify people within that group and, empower them and try to get them to, be a proxy force. And so, so the idea is, you could land Marines on the coast here, and they would be, not under attack, because, the population here is primarily, Baluchs. So, and then if the Baluchs are able to, develop any kind of a fighting force to help, the Marines. So this is one thought. This is one hope. And essentially you would work your way down the coast, controlling the land until you controlled all this coastline. And then from there, you could wrest control of the strait from Iran. So, that's one plausible ground invasion scenario. I think it's actually the most plausible ground invasion scenario, but I don't think it would work. I think it would be a catastrophe. And that's why I think the most logical thing is these carrier groups and these Marine Expeditionary Units are not going to be landing. They're not going to be invading Iran. I think they're going to stay out here, and they're going to be interdicting shipping, or they're going to, have the ability to interdict shipping. And in the meantime, of course, they're going to continue the war like it has been going for the previous 4 weeks. They're going to be, using their standoff missiles and just bombing different places in Iran. And they might be, bombing this coastline a lot. But I really don't think there's going to be a ground invasion. I think all these forces are going to, stay out of range, out of Iranian missile range, and they'll use their standoff weapons to continue the war, very much as it was in the first few weeks. So that's my guess. But I did want to mention, just this. So there's rumors that, like a 1.5 billion, investment in energy was made right before Trump's announcement, either that he was going to, destroy their, he was going to destroy Iran's biggest power plant, or it happened right before he said, we've come to a diplomatic settlement. And so, I mean, this is a classic pump and dump scheme. Like if you're familiar with pump and dump schemes, you pump a lot of money, you inflate a price, you get investors to invest. Oh shit, I'm going to get on board with this thing. They create a huge bubble, and then they know when that bubble is going to collapse, and they sell high. So this is the kind of thing I think Trump and his family have probably been doing a lot more than we realize. And I think that it's highly likely and probable that the entirety of this these threats to just first pump up oil prices, we're going to destroy Iran, they have 48 hours, and then to dump right before the stock market opens. I don't really see a strategic benefit in that, other than to make a lot of money for someone, which I'm sure happened. And also to, we know that by doing that right before the stock market opened, he kept the price of oil low, because he's getting pressure. He's pressured by all the investors, the global economy. And as the the price of oil goes up, it's bad for Trump, because his base, all of the wealthy oligarchs who, own businesses and rely on energy, and his allies, right? Like all the allies in South Korea, Japan, they're all putting a lot of pressure on him. Like, what are you doing? Like, you're destroying our economy. You're wrecking our country. And so, what he really wants to do is to not allow Iran to cause, his invasion of Iran to cause, a global catastrophe. On the other hand, I think that they realize that at some point they're going to cause a global catastrophe. And so it's about timing. And of course, they would like to win. They would like to destroy Iran. They would like to take over Iran's resources, put in a government there. But if they can't do that, again, I think they will be willing to just crash the global economy. But they're going to try and do it with as little pain as possible. They're going to try and win. They're going to try and win this geopolitical chess match. They're going to try and maintain their global domination, weaken China, weaken Russia. I mean, this is the ultimate objective that we have to keep in mind. And I think they understand that at some point, if they have to, they're going to go ahead and just switch the kill switch on the global economy. Of course, they don't want to, and if they can win by other means, they're going to do that. So, I think they're hoping that, with the forces being brought in, they can continue to put a lot of pressure on the Iranian government, and somehow get a victory, somehow force a capitulation. And they can string this out for years, like they did with Syria, before they finally get their coup de grace, which would be the overthrow of that government. But I mean, to me, that's a pipe dream. To me, that's never going to happen. But I'm not a hubristic Western imperial strategist, so and I'm not privy to what they're saying. But so on the one hand, it looks like a catastrophe. It looks like Trump is just a total failure, and his whole plan of destroying Iran is going down in flames, and it's really blowing back in his face, and it's really threatening U.S. assets in the region and his allies, Israel, the Gulf states. Like, those are legitimately, their survival is under question. It's being threatened, and so from a certain perspective, you think, okay, well, it's a loss. Like, Trump is losing. But on the other hand, you got to look at the bigger picture of, hey, you're trying to screw with China. And you're not gonna hurt China's economy unless there's a global economic collapse. You're just not gonna do it. The only way China gets harmed is if the energy, if you can implement an energy embargo against China, that is their greatest hope to do. And so and they can do that by, destroying Iran's energy exports, which then, so Iran's energy exports, 80% plus go to China. You destroy those. What is Iran going to do? Iran is going to destroy the energy exports of the Gulf states. And then you don't have any more energy exporting from the Gulf states. And China, again, is a big recipient of Gulf energy. But it's also obviously South Korea, Japan, all those countries are also big importers of Mideast energy.
I want to interject a little bit.
Okay, I'm sorry.
No, it's good. I want to interject to say, yes, it's true. 80% of Iran's oil goes to China, which is, China's their crucial trading partner because they're so sanctioned. But the important number is how much does China get from Iran? I don't remember the figure. I think it's 5 or 10%.
Yeah, it's very little.
Overall. So, yeah.
Now,
so
hey, Ian, keep in mind it's 5%, 5 to 10% of just oil, and China only like less than 30% of their economy is oil. So it is really just a small part of their overall energy needs, and so it's important to understand both metrics. It's not like it's 5 to 10% of all of their energy. It's just 5 to 10% of their oil energy, which again is just a small part of their overall energy economy. But okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I mean, I just want to address several of your points. So yeah, that's my point on China. So it's not necessarily wrong, but as far as supporting ethnic dissidents in Iran, the problem is that we can't know how much preparation went into this, but it seems like there's very little preparation, and also we have to ask how much of the Mossad's and the CIA's internal collaborators and agents and whatever whatever that type of infrastructure they had in Iran itself, how much of it was expended during the uprising.
They killed 40,000 people.
Right. That 6 billion, 100 billion, more than Stalin and Mao and Pol Pot combined. They just killed, they killed billions of people. How many internal assets in Iran do they have left? So the main thing is when you send that force of 5 or 10,000 or however many they send, there's this idea that for that to work at the same time, you have your sleeper cells or whoever start operations. But if they don't have a coherent organization to start something like that, then it's pointless. It's going to do nothing. And also, there's this idea. It's from what I've been reading the last few days, it does seem like those uprisings were used by Israel. Actually, no, there was a New York Times. There's a New York Times article. I think it was published either this morning or yesterday, saying this is from internal sources that Israel did that orchestrated that big uprising, all that dissent. Yes, Daryl mentioned the same.
Sorry, I'll let you do it.
Same thing. Yes, it's the New York Times I read yesterday that Israel did that so they would have something to show for Trump. It's like, look how weak the regime is. Look how they're on their last legs. If you just do a decapitation strike, it will collapse. So it's a PR. So when you think about it, it wasn't even because they thought the uprising would do anything. They just wanted something to show for Trump. It was a PR. It was literally like a TikTok offense to show to Trump on TikTok. It's like, look at all these beautiful Iranian girls rising against the regime.
Yeah.
All you have to do is do a decapitation strike and the whole house of cards will come down. And that's why Trump was so angry. Like, he was yelling at his generals, and he was just really upset because he's like, everybody told me that it would just collapse, and then it didn't, and now he's upset. But I don't think I mean, maybe they'll try something. I'm not saying they won't try something like that. I just think that from what we've seen so far, there's very low odds of success. Now, I think there is this, like you, and your other thing, the other possibility that you floated when you had that map up was that so they could interdict Iranian shipments. So just for our viewers' sakes, for anyone who's not been following how this war has been going, what happened was, I think it was day 2 or 3 of the war, Iran sealed off the strait, and they didn't do it the way people thought. And I remember the strait, even as a kid, I remember talking about the Strait of Hormuz, and it was always presented to the public, at the Western public, I mean, as they seal off the strait and nothing gets in or out. That's how it was always sold to us. But Iran did something different. They said they blocked our ships and let their ships through. And apparently, in the Pentagon, no one had expected that. They just assumed they would throw mines everywhere. Like actually, even I mentioned this in the last show. You know, they were talking about free floating. You know, well, no, that didn't actually happen. They established this security posture in the straits that can intimidates neutral and hostile shipping from coming through, and their own shipping, friendly shipping, continues. That apparently caught everybody by surprise. Now, that said, Trump has not interdicted Iranian shipping. He hasn't stopped it, and he could. He absolutely could. There's nothing preventing those carrier groups from doing that. So they don't need a ground invasion to interdict shipping. They could do it now, but they haven't. And the reason they haven't, even Trump easing those sanctions, those secondary sanctions against Russian oil, it's the same thing. It's very important to keep the oil price as low as possible. And he's actually been pretty successful. It's gone up over $100 a barrel, but it's not, you know, some people, if you look at the first week of news coverage, people were predicting 150 a barrel, 200 a barrel. That's not happened. Though they have been releasing strategic reserves, they release strategic reserves, and they've been doing this media manipulations, market manipulation, keep the price down. And so far, that's been a success. But it's come at the cost of they've had to let Iran and they've had to let Russia make oil profits, because unfortunately it's kind of a weird situation when, as far as the market goes, as far as the world economy goes, we're in the same boat. You know, Russia is sitting in one corner, Iran is sitting in a different corner, China is sitting in a different corner, and we're poking holes in the boat. But you know, it's like, don't poke too many. You know, poke enough holes to get that guy's corner wet, but don't poke so many holes. You know, your corner gets where the boat sinks. It's a weird situation, though it's not unprecedented. I mean, again, Ukraine. I mentioned Ukraine's our template for a lot of the things that are happening right now. We have this very weird situation in Ukraine where Russia was transporting oil through Ukraine to Europe, who would sell it back to Ukraine. So it was weird because Russia was financing, literally supplying oil to their own enemy. And Ukraine was literally, you know, transporting the oil of the enemy to their ally, who sold it back. And it's still happening. Europe sanctioned Russian oil, but then they buy it from India and China, but they pay more. But Russia gets less because they're selling it at a discount. It's a strange situation, to say the least. And we have something very similar. It's actually interesting how over 4 years we're making fun of Russia for, you know, they're look at all the, you know, the war economy, and they're doing blah 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 blah, and we're doing essentially the same thing. And also, when it comes to reporting losses, we made fun of Russia for these admittedly kind of silly things. You know, they didn't want to acknowledge when Ukrainian weapons destroyed Russian assets. So they would say there was an accident, or, you know, friendly fire or whatever. They would come with some excuse that probably sounded kind of silly, we made fun of them for that. Look at Russia, they're coming up with these silly, excuses on Twitter. And then we're in a similar situation. We don't want to acknowledge an Iranian weapon shots down an American plane or hits an American ship. So we come up with these silly stories that they shot themselves down, or it's Kuwait that shot them down. We come up with all these silly stories. So we're doing it's like the same PR campaign Russia did, after making fun of them for doing it, of course.
Well, and the same thing is like we have a special military operation against Iran. It's not a war. It's a
special combat operation. We're not plagiarizing. We changed one word, and we changed one word. It's a special combat operation. Yes.
So what should we expect? What should we expect? I think we can expect continued escalation. I think ultimately what's going to happen will not be resolved diplomatically. I think the Gulf states. That's what the newspapers are reporting, that the Gulf states, such as the UAE and Saudi Arabia, are angry with Iran and they're going to strike back. And so, again, I think ultimately what is going to happen is that, the U.S. and its allies are going to destroy Iran's energy infrastructure, and Iran is going to destroy the energy infrastructure of the Gulf states and Israel. This will lead to a de facto energy embargo against China because, it's also going to collapse the global economy. But, as I've
made, you said that, and thank you. You said that. I don't agree with that. I mean, because it's going to hurt the USA. It's going to hurt the U.S. system more than it'll hurt China.
Well, here's why it's not going to hurt the U.S. system, because who does Trump work for? Does he work for you and me? No, we're gonna be sacrificing. No, no. I mean, it's gonna raise the price of oil, and the United States is an oil exporter. We have, we're a net energy exporter. We might not be a net oil exporter, but we're a net energy exporter. And if we drive up the price of oil, like that's going to benefit those countries that are net oil exporters. If we destroy all the oil resources, the oil export capacity of the West Asia, of the Middle East, that's going to drive prices up. We have plenty of energy here. We export energy. And so it's us, Russia, Venezuela, which we've already kind of apparently have some kind of an agreement with. Like this is the thinking, right? Everybody is going to suffer, and fuck them. They exist to sacrifice for us, and for us, I mean the transnational oligarchs who who have created this empire and who this empire serves. And so if Western Europe has to suffer, if South Korea, Japan has to suffer as we deal with trying to weaken our main existential rival, which is China, like that's what we're going to do. But so the U.S. would actually be positioned pretty good in I mean, of course, there's going to be suffering, but it's not going to be anything like the kind of suffering that they're going to have in Western Europe or South Korea or Japan or these countries that are, dependent on, oil from the Mideast. But no, that's how this is. That is the trajectory. That is the direction, and which again, leads us to conclude that since they're not stopping this madness, that they want it to go forward, right? Because they could stop it. The United States could stop it. Trump could stop it today. He could adhere to Iran's terms for ceasefire, but he's not going to. And so the inevitable trajectory that we're on is a total destruction of Mideast oil, but the United States won't be blamed for that. Like China can't say that the United States has declared war against them and doing a criminal embargo of energy, because a criminal energy embargo is an act of war. China can't say that, but we're doing it anyway. And it's just, it's just a result of this war that's going on in the Middle East. So, I mean, I don't know what other way out is there, Ian? Iran is not going to fold. Iran is not going to surrender. The United States could conceivably do that, but if they don't, the end result will be exactly what I'm saying. Like there's going to be a mutual destruction of oil export capacity in the Middle East with the Gulf states and Iran.
I don't know. And my problem with the whole idea of mutual destruction to harm, particularly China economically. Well, there's a couple problems. One, China still has those overland routes. I mean, they don't have sufficient overland routes with Russia to support them. They don't. As of
Can
right
I
now, but
speak to
that's
that real
changing. But
quick?
that's changing. It's changing.
Let me, can I speak to that real quick? So the overland route. So yes,
Right.
Russia to China, a big one, but the United States is very busy attacking Russian energy infrastructure as well. Now, to what percent have they degraded Russian oil exports to China? I don't know, but I know that attacks are
Very
constant
little.
and they attack very little so far. They have 5,000 tankers. They've only interdicted like 10 of them, maybe. But the other thing is these pipelines, like going through Myanmar, those are constantly under attack. And so, the U.S. has
Myanmar
situated
under
its.
attack.
Oh yeah.
Who's attacked them?
What? Well,
Who's
the
attacked them?
Myanmar rebels, the
Yeah.
free Burma Rangers. So the United States has proxy forces in Burma, or sorry, Myanmar, that are attacking the government, and they're being it's just typical CIA proxy forces. So same with the pipeline. The Baluchs in Pakistan are also destroying the Belt and Road infrastructure that China is trying to create. So the United States has prepared this. They have put their military capacity to do damage to the Belt and Road and to energy import and export. Well, China's energy imports. So anyway, again, they've strategically situated themselves and put pieces in place to stop energy imports to China. But you were making a point. I just wanted to address one at a time before I forgot. But what was your other after?
Well, so the problem is that the U.S. system is based on the petrodollar, and it's very I mean, it's worldwide, but it's very centered in the Arab world with the Gulf states. 90% of the world's oil transactions are done with the dollar. And, the interesting thing is that over the last, as I became more, anti imperialist, more, into the global south and BRICS and all this, I mean, there's always this international voice of de-dollarization, and where China's sticking it to the man, Russia's sticking it to the man, and as I did my own research and just watched global events, I kind of came to the realization that when it comes to major governments like China and Russia, there actually isn't any opposition to the dollar. Like they don't like the U.S. government constantly rocking the boat, but no one's really in opposition to the dollar. Russians aren't against the dollar. Chinese are not against the dollar. They're like, well, it's an international currency. It's convenience. We don't have a problem with using the dollar. We're not against it. If anyone destroys the dollar, it's going to be the U.S. itself that destroys it, that just causes so much chaos and destabilizes it so much. No matter what anyone else does, it collapses. Now, if the thing that's why I feel very pessimistic about this war, because if they cannot defeat Iran, and there's an actual defection, if there's either internal regime changes in the Gulf states, or the governments themselves just say, you know what, we're throwing in the towel, we're realigning with Iran, and we're using the Chinese yuan to do currency, or gold, or just whatever, a different currency. That would be the end. This game of we can just print trillions of dollars out of thin air is based on there just being so many dollars in circulation because everybody uses it, because it's the petrodollar. If it stops being the petrodollar, then that game is over. It's a disaster. It's a
No, and
disaster.
it's an exorbitant privilege that the U.S. has had since World War II. This the U.S. dollar is the world reserve currency. Everybody having to use it to buy energy. That has, like you said, it has exactly allowed the U.S. to print trillions and trillions of dollars and not having massive inflation. And so, but yeah, that system would definitely come to an end if if the global energy market collapses. I mean, that system will come to an end. But again, I think what we're seeing is that the U.S. has kind of understood that that system has to come to an end, because if it doesn't come to an end, China is going to, develop as the greatest economy in the world, and they will be unstoppable. So really, the window of opportunity to take out China is dictated by China's efforts to become energy self-sufficient. So right now, China is actively at breakneck speed trying to become energy self-sufficient, because they understand that the U.S. is trying to use energy as a weapon against them. So they're building nuclear, they're developing renewables, and they're really trying to become self-sufficient and get themselves off of reliance of a foreign energy. And so, but that's going to be another 5 years. And this is the closing window of opportunity that you always hear talking about, where the Western think tankers really believe that we have to go now to take down China. And again, you're just simply not going to take them down without, because China is the number one trade partner of most of the world's countries, probably 75% of the world countries, China is the number one trade partner of. You're not going to harm China economically without a tremendous global economic upheaval. And so that is the direction that the United States is going, because they understand to get China, we have to get China. If we don't get China, China's going to win, and we have to get China. And soon, go ahead.
It's just my contention with that. It's just, if they if they collapse the petrodollar, then how are they going to stick it to China if they collapse their own system?
Well, because the system stopped working for them. So they feel that, they developed this game, and now China is on a trajectory to win this game. And so now we've got to, overturn the game board and create a new game that we're going to win. And we're going to do that through power, right? Through our military, through our Navy might, and through controlling energy resources and shipping lanes. And we're going to be able to have the power to interdict, and it'll be up to the United States. It'll be up to the transnational oligarchy to determine what countries are allowed energy and what countries are not allowed energy. And this is just going to be the new normal. So, I mean, I've been, prophesying this and, talking about this for years now, about how drastic this change is going to be. And I'm always saying, we're only at the very beginning of this kind of a transition. And, not until we see the nuclear taboo broken and, a total energy embargo of China, will we really understand the extent to which the transnational oligarchs are prepared to go to maintain their wealth, power, and privilege, and not hand control of the planet to others, namely China, Russia, etc. So they're willing to burn, everything down rather than cede control to those people who, they're not able to dictate terms to. So, I mean, that's the broad trajectory of where we're going. How exactly that plays out, we're watching in real time. And every day, we get closer to that point. And so in the Middle East with Iran, we've got to keep that in context. And so for that reason, to me, it's foolish to think that we're doing what we're doing in Iran for Israel. Like, that is such a narrow, small, perspective. And the reality is that there's much bigger geopolitical considerations that are driving these kinds of events. And it's not that Israel has stolen, captured our government and it's pursuing. No, there's a transnational oligarchy. They're thinking globally, and they're going to move us towards a place of, significant change and real catastrophe. So a new normal, that'll make COVID look like, it was something great,
Well, Well, it's not impossible because, well, we have the debt, and how are they going to get rid of that debt? I mean, it's what 39. We're at what 38, 39
Yeah.
trillion
No,
dollars.
yeah, it's the trajectory of the current system is not looking good for the United States. They have to overturn the game board, and the debt is part of the problem. Like, it's an unsustainable debt. And especially if you just allow these BRICS countries to, create an alternative, system that the developing world can turn to. Why would they allow us to just keep exploiting them and raping them? So, the game board has to be overturned. Like, this is the
I don't know.
what the
just,
oligarchs, this is the
go ahead.
perception of the oligarchs.
I just don't see BRICS even trying to set up, alternative. I did say both, the Russia and China, and even Iran. Iran was not like, oh, we're going to overturn the petrodollar. They were constantly.
They're happy with the rules-based order. They want
They
the United
were.
States to follow the rules too. And what is the United States doing? The United States is telling them, fuck you. This is our fucking planet. It's our fucking game, and we don't fucking follow the rules, motherfuckers. So what did they do? That's what they did in Venezuela. They kidnapped the fucking head of state. They just started fucking bombing Iran. Like, no, the United States is saying goodbye to the rules-based order. They're saying we don't give a fuck. Why are they doing that? Because the rules-based order isn't working for them.
I don't see that as a rational, like, logical, planned out decision. I just can't agree with that because, I mean, if we did collapse let's say we did collapse the petrodollar, and you had all of the consequences that went with it. You had the inflation where you just, you go to the store and the prices change several times a day. You come in the morning and bread costs $100. You come back in the afternoon and it costs $150, which is what happens in countries that experience hyperinflation.
Yeah.
How is that going to keep them in power? Who is going to respect the USA? No country experiencing hyperinflation like that is respected as a world power. And so I don't see this as,
again, the reality will be that the U.S. will be in the best shape of any country on the planet, right? Who's gonna be in better shape than the United States?
Well, the USA is in the best shape now. If they overturn the game board, as you say, then they're going to be in the worst shape.
Well, no, and I'm saying, that's not the perception of the transnational oligarchs that rule the West, right? They understand that there's a trajectory here, and there's a small window of opportunity to stick it to China. Now, look, they would prefer not to crash the global economy. They would prefer for Iran to surrender and hand over their oil to the Western oligarchs. That's their preference. And so, again, the decision comes down to, from the oligarchs' perspective, what is more important? Maintaining this current system and not crashing it, or defeating their rivals in Iran, Russia, and China. And so that is the decision they're going to have to make. But the question is, are they psychopathic enough to, break the nuclear taboo and, destroy all Middle Eastern energy exports in order to continue their efforts to undermine their rivals and defeat them and maintain themselves as the global hegemon? And so I'm thinking, they're not going to take the L, that they're psychopathic and crazy enough to plunge the world into turmoil and crash the global economy, crash energy markets. Shipping lanes, shipping lanes are going to become just pirate grounds, right? And it's going to be a new normal. So, but the United States, of course, is going to be situating itself as strategically as it can, while it does its very best to, harm the rival countries it's trying to contain. And again, we're at the very beginning of this process, but you can clearly see, how it's going. And I have seen no signs that they are stopping, that they're realizing, hey, we can't do this. Again, right now, you have another carrier group. You have 2 or 3 Marine Expeditionary Units on their way to the Gulf. Does that seem to you like they've decided, you know what? We need to salvage this global economy. We shouldn't crash it. No, it's the absolute opposite. But and again, they think that, you know, they'll be able to somehow manage this in a way that benefits their interest. Now, keep in mind, the billionaire oligarchs are not going to be suffering. They're not going to be sacrificing. The billionaire oligarchs, like who owns this Facebook platform? Zuckerberg. Zuckerberg has like a fucking 50 billion underground bunker on the fucking beautiful island of Kauai. You know, that's where he's going to be with his harem of women and anything he can think of wanting. You know, he's going to watch the world burn from his luxury bunker with all the other oligarchs, and you know, it's a game to them. They're not going to be suffering. So I don't know. That's just the way I see things playing out, and because I see no sign that they are going to be sensible and think to themselves, hey, wait a minute, maybe we shouldn't, you know, maybe we shouldn't do this. And we're every day we're getting closer. And again, if I'm correct, we're only at the very beginning. We haven't seen anything yet, right? But my guess is, my prediction is that with the Middle East, all of the oil exports are going to be destroyed. They're going to go after Iran's oil fields and natural gas fields. Iran will reciprocate, and there will be no more oil exports from. What'll that do to the global economy? That's when we will start, you know, seeing the kind of new normal that I'm kind of describing here.
I think Israel's the one winner here. I mean, because if you're an Israeli, it makes sense. If you see Americans and the U.S. as an expendable resource, it's like, okay, if the USA destroys itself, who cares? As long as they achieve the objectives that we have. If the USA destroys itself, but also destroys Iran in the process, that's still a win for Israel. Because if Israel establishes itself as the regional hegemon in the Middle East, that makes them a global power. That makes Israel a global power.
I don't
so it doesn't
think
matter if the USA collapses in the process. They won't need U.S. support at that point.
No,
but
Israel doesn't have. Israel can't be the global power because, I mean, again, if you destroy, because in a regional war, Iran's going to win. Iran will take over the Gulf states and Israel. That's what will happen.
Okay, sure. If Iran wins, but if you're from the Israeli perspective, the Israelis think if you're an Israeli, let's say you're a person in Netanyahu's government and you think you're going to win, it's logical to use the USA to defeat Iran. Right?
Yeah, no, Israel is dependent on the United States. Israel would not exist if it wasn't for the United States. And if the United States leaves the Gulf, the West Asia, if the United States leaves West Asia, Israel will be destroyed. Like there's no, and I think very soon, you know, Iran will win and the United States will leave West Asia. And then, you know, Israel will have to change its name to Palestine. Like this is what's going to happen in the near future, unless the United States, you know, agrees to some kind of Iranian terms. And so the question is, can they, you know, militarily force Iran to accept some kind of diplomatic solution that allows Israel to survive and allows the Gulf monarchies to survive? But right now, you know, it doesn't look like Iran is going to be entertaining anything that the U.S. So, you know, maybe there's a diplomatic solution. Maybe that, you know, the U.S. can come to some kind of concession. But look, we have the same conundrum in Russia with Ukraine, right? Same conundrum. Like Russia's winning. There's no doubt Russia will win. And I say the same thing about Iran. Iran is winning. Iran will win. But that would just mean that the West would have to take a huge L. And that diplomacy, which is there for the taking, right? Like right now, I'll bet you the West could offer Russia a peace agreement, a comprehensive peace agreement that would allow, what is that city right on the Black Sea? What's that city? The Russian city that is going to be taken shortly. not shortly, but eventually.
That's a lot of Russian cities that are
Built by Catherine the Great. It was built by Catherine the Great.
There's a lot of them. Odessa. There's Odessa.
Odessa. So again, so there's a diplomatic settlement that would keep Odessa as part of Ukraine. The U.S. could get right now. The West right now could get a settlement with Russia, a comprehensive peace that would allow Odessa to remain part of Ukraine. But the longer this goes on, the more likely it is that Odessa will be Russian, part of the Russian Federation.
Well,
and so
no one cares if Odessa is Russian. It's not. Okay,
no,
so look,
it has
huge
geostrategic implications. I don't know why you.
If Russia took all of Ukraine, no one would care. I mean, that's ultimately the truth. But look, you're right when you say if Iran won and the USA folded, Israel would fall. I think that's absolutely true. But imagine, I mean, really, just try to put yourselves in the shoes of an Israeli person, a Zionist. Put yourself in the shoes of a Zionist. It's a very bad situation. I mean, because American support for Israel is collapsing. It's absolutely collapsing. I mean, and there have been polls. The only American who still gives a shit and likes Israel and isn't absolutely opposed to Israel is the American white conservative older than 50, right? That's the only group that still supports Israel, particularly in non-college graduates. That's it. That's all they have left, right? They know that in 10 years, U.S. support will be gone. They'll just literally, I mean, it's not even a matter of politics or bribery or, whatever. It's just all of the Americans who support Israel will literally be dead. There'll be no one left who still supports Israel. So they've got this window to attack Iran, and they have to win. That's what they have right now. There was an interview between Tucker Carlson and Glenn Greenwald yesterday or the day before yesterday, and that was Glenn Greenwald. Like, Tucker didn't quite get it for some reason. He usually does, but he didn't quite get it. But Glenn Greenwald was saying it's just like it's desperation. They have enough American support right now to have a war with Iran. If they wait, they'll lose it, and then it's over, and they lose.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting aspect that could be true. It's public opinion. It's you're only going to have decreased support for Israel going forward with the new generation. That's true. And look, I see proof of that when I check Facebook posts. You know how pro-Israel things will come on your feed, and so I'll see something that gets 20,000 likes, right? And it'll be like, Iran is committing atrocities by dropping cluster bombs on civilians. And I'll go and I'll look at the comments, and 75% will be laugh reacts. And it makes me so happy. I'm like, thank God people are finally getting it. Israel trying to play the victim after they do a fucking genocide in Gaza and then start a war with Iran. And now they're crying that they're losing that war. But they are losing that war. And the United States does not have a military solution to Iran. Iran has made sure of that for the past 47 years. Is that when the revolution occurred? They've been, preparing for this event, and they are ready. And that's what's going to happen. The United States will be kicked out of West Asia, and that'll leave and isolate Israel. And Israel will no longer exist as an apartheid Jewish state. Thank God. That's the future. And you can, you're going to get there after you destroy all the energy exports in the area. And you might get there after the nuclear taboo is broken. But inevitably, that little tiny shithole country of 10 million people, it's probably only 5 million now, just is not strong enough on its own to resist Iran, which is a huge country of 100 million people with a very powerful military. And so, again, the longer this goes on, the more, attritional warfare Iran is conducting against Israel, keeping the population in bomb shelters. Who knows? Iran might let up once they feel that they have gotten sufficient, reforms from the United States. But right now they're demanding the United States leave the Gulf states. The United States take all of its military bases and go home. And what does that mean? What would happen to Israel once the United States is not there? What would happen would Israel would have to change its behavior very quickly. And that's possible, right? That's possible. I think Iran would allow a new normal with a two-state solution, rights for the Palestinians. But again, what kind of Israel, what kind of, Zionist wants to live in an Israel that has to limit itself to being just a tiny power that is hated, universally reviled? No, it'll be the end of Israel. If the United States leaves, it's the end of Israel, and I can't imagine how the United States can stay. So anyway, where are the anti-war protests? Good question. It's not a war. It's a what did Trump call it, Ian?
Special combat operation.
Special combat operation. Well, no, and it's awful. Like, but here's what's happening. Todd, I take heart because I don't see the anti-war protests, but I see a lot of people siding with Iran. I see a lot of people in this country wanting Iran to win. And so, they might not out protesting, but on social media, they are definitely registering their support for Iran and their hatred of Israel. And, of course, they're liberals, and they think they think Israel has controlled the U.S. foreign policy. But their anti-Israel is really the anti-oligarch. And so there's a huge anti-oligarch sentiment, even if they just think it's anti-Israel sentiment. Ian, you left me. I have all kinds of things to say. So we had some good viewing. We got a lot of likes. I appreciate that. And I know there was a lot of comments that sometimes I was talking too quickly to read and pay attention to.
There's technical difficulties. I'm back. But yes.
I was trying to think of where we're going to go from here. I feel happy that I got out basically, what I see happening, what I think is going to happen, and what I think, and why it's going to happen. But we could talk about my book, Ian.
Let's talk about your book.
My new ebook. So, the big thing is, just these two frameworks for understanding reality. There's the liberal framework that it's the mass religion of the West. Everybody is immersed in this liberal ideology from cradle to grave, and most people don't even see it as an ideology. They don't even understand that the way that they think, that there's a competing way to think, and that competing way to think, has a lot of points in its favor, right? Like, it's a competing way to think, and it's a better way to think, I would argue, and it makes a lot more sense. But the liberals, just immersed in liberal ideology, don't really understand anything about that. They don't understand that, what they think about history is contested. They don't understand that the way they think about things is one way out of at least one other way. There's competing ways to do it. So my book is kind of about this paradigm, and I wanted to just put it out there for free as a public service, but Amazon made me charge 99 cents. And so it's an ebook. It's about almost 300 pages. I did have considerable help from artificial intelligence. And so I know a lot of people have asked me that. And I definitely don't want to pretend that I did every word all by myself without any help. But the point is, what is the content? And so, I'm using AI more and more. I always give credit to AI. I never pretend that I'm doing something when AI does it, even in my Facebook commentary. But I know a lot of people are turned off by AI. Like, oh, you're using AI. And like, okay, fine. But what are the arguments being made? It's an essential tool. It's very helpful. It could just very quickly, do a comprehensive response. And so the question is it right? And if it's not right, well, address why it's not right. Let's have the discussion. So AI was very helpful. And really, it just lays out a comprehensive. So it's called liberalism versus socialism, a comprehensive contrast. So it really explores and lays bare these two ideological frameworks, and it makes the case that the more useful, the superior framework is the socialist framework. And so if you look at history through the socialist framework, like, it makes a lot more sense and everything becomes clear. You look through the liberal framework, you don't understand shit. You don't understand history. You don't understand what's going on right now, and you have no idea where we're going, where we should be headed in the future. Like, that's what liberalism does. It is the maintenance of the status quo. It's the maintenance of the oligarchy, and and their systems of exploitation. So that's essentially what liberalism is. And so I just kind of make that argument in a as comprehensive of a way as I can in 300 pages. And I appreciate, I've had several sales so far, and I'm sorry that I have to say sales because I'm not trying to make money off of it. Unless I sell 1 million copies, then I'd make some money. But no, it's like it's super important because it explains why people in the West are so dumb. It explains why they're so disconnected from reality, and it's useful. And so there's standalone chapters on topics that might be of interest to you, from history to, like I said, specific ideological things. But you can go to my Facebook wall, and I've a couple times promoted it there. And anyway, so thank you for letting me rant about my book. I did want to do that at least once. I should put it on your blog. I should move it to your blog too.
Yes, we will publish it to reading. If you go to readingjunkie.com, we have this podcast, and we have several other, I write articles there as well. So readingjunkie.com, and Billy Bob's book pretty soon will also be there too. But yes, so, and also, guys, I just shared, and Skoida, I just shared the link to his blog, or not his blog, his book. I shared it, the Amazon link. I shared it a few minutes ago.
So yeah, no, that's what
while you were talking, I found the Amazon link and shared it.
Thank you. So no, I'm interested in having more discussions about the contrasting perspectives and the different ways of looking at things, and that's what I really think is lacking in our society, because again, everybody is just fully immersed so much into liberalism that they don't even realize there's a debate. And so my point here is to not necessarily make everybody agree with me, although they should if they're smart, but to at least understand that there is alternative perspectives. And so the last thing, Ian, so the other thing is what liberals tend to think, and I run into them all the time, is that, if you don't understand things how they understand things, they automatically assume that you're either stupid, right? You don't know how to learn. You didn't study in school because school was just telling you the truth. You didn't study. Or you have malign intent, like you're super lazy and you want to steal from other people, right? Or you're an authoritarian and you just want to control people. Like, this is really what liberals think in their stupid liberal brains, because they don't understand, that there is a total, competing way of thinking about things. And so the whole point is to bring this to their attention and then have the discussion. Which framework makes the most sense out of reality? Which framework is reality based? Which framework, should we, which framework should we, embrace and utilize? And so I think, once you start thinking in those terms, like, it's impossible not to conclude that liberalism is just a bullshit religion shoved down all of our throats from cradle to grave by the oligarchs, because it serves their oligarchic interests. It maintains the status quo. It maintains oligarchy. And so, and our enemy, I think, is the transnational oligarchs. Our enemy isn't Israel. Our enemy isn't people who are Jewish. Our enemy isn't Iran. It's not Islam. Our enemy is the transnational oligarchy, and their global system of imperialism and exploitation that they maintain through lying to everyone and deluding people with their propaganda apparatus, indoctrinating them into liberalism, blah, 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 blah. So I think my book, is very useful in, deconstructing this ideological competition and letting and giving people the understanding that an ideological competition exists, because they don't even understand that much. But so an hour and 20 minutes in. So I like this audio version. That would be interesting. And people have asked for paper version. I think Amazon can do that. I just did an ebook because
Billy Bob and I will talk after the show. I want to talk to Billy Bob about it. Anyway, we will have a paper. I can easily make a paperback version. For some people like physical copies of books. That's reasonable to ask for. We can manage that.
No, that would be great if because I know it was an option with Amazon, but I didn't even pursue it because, well, number one, it was going to be more expensive, and I didn't want to make people pay. But the other thing is, if you don't have access to Amazon, I can send you my final draft on a Word document. I've been sending people my final draft via a Word document through Facebook Messenger. You can ask me for that if you want. But paper. People like paper. That's true. So no, Ian, thank you for letting me promote my own things.
Well, I will promote Vykusny Itachka because that's actually the cup I'm drinking from. Vykusny Itachka is Russian McDonald's, and sometimes they do promotions where they will put a cup or a toy, a children's toy, in your meal.
Can
so I have a whole collection. I have a whole collection of them now. What's that?
Can we DoorDash that restaurant here in the States? Probably not.
We don't have DoorDash, but we do have. But Yandex does delivery, and there's several different delivery services you can use. You can have stuff, even in Crimea, even out in this rural, very rural provincial area in Crimea, we can get deliveries of stuff. So yes, Russia does have deliveries, and people drive. The delivery drivers, by the way, drive cars. They don't ride bears. I know some people think that Russia doesn't have cars; they just ride bears everywhere. But yes, So we do have delivery. They ride cars to get the deliveries. Yes, the technical difficulties. I had to get my Happy Meal. No, actually, I'm just kidding. We don't actually. Funny enough, there's no Vykusny Itachka in Crimea. There's the big Russian companies are not in Crimea, and the reason why is because Crimea is like double sanctioned. Russia is sanctioned, but Crimea is like extra sanctioned because it's illegally annexed territory, as they call it. So the big Russian companies just kind of pretend that Crimea isn't in Russia, even though it is. It's kind of interesting.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yes, what they tend to use, they use different names. They'll use some cases they'll use different names, or they'll just kind of, well, even like the cell phone companies will, like for me, I have a certain international, it's not even specifically Russian, but like my cell phone company, when I'm in Crimea, it will be in roaming mode. It works the same, but it's technically roaming, and it's a political reason. Yes. So so Crimea is kind of an interesting place for multiple reasons.
Yeah, we need to come visit you post World War III.
Right.
So looking forward to that.
Well, remember the beach. Remember in 2023 Ukrainian summer offensive, which turned into a winter offensive, when they were saying we would have. It was Ben Hodges who said that we'll have a party in Crimea in June, Remember when he said that? And
Yes.
yes,
He's such a turd, that Ben Hodges. But I'm sure he's getting kickbacks from the the missile manufacturers and the drone manufacturers for his warmongering. But yeah, no, he's not invited, Ian. He's not invited to our post World War III party in Crimea. But some of our special guests. I know Leo wants to go. He's going to DJ for us, he said, which will be great. But yeah, so I'm ready to wrap up. Probably.
it's good. It's a good point to wrap up on, I think.
I know I'm expecting to have a Friday episode with Christine Lynn. We usually do every other Friday, and so we'll probably reconvene with her on this coming Friday. But no, thank you for all the viewers. We had a lot of comments, a lot of views, a lot of likes. We appreciate that. There's a lot going on, and we will definitely have a lot to talk about on our next episode. Thank you very much, and we will see you then.